Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today we are going over our previews and predictions for what should be an absolutely amazing Week 9 of the 2024 college football season. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and just as a reminder, we have our $100 giveaway going for the season. Be sure to follow us on our social medias for a chance to win. And without further ado, let's jump into some games to watch. Starting with the games tonight, we have Louisville at Boston College. Both teams are 4-3 coming into this one, and both teams are going to be looking for bounce back wins here. And we know a good bit about both of these teams, how they're going to want to play, what they are and aren't capable of. Louisville looks like the better team on paper, but they'll be playing a Boston College team that's undefeated at home. Great ACC matchup and a very important game for both of these teams. We should be getting each team's best in this one. And for the next game tonight, it's Rutgers at USC. These teams are in equally interesting and somewhat frustrating circumstances for completely different reasons. Rutgers didn't look bad to start the year, but injuries have really decimated their team, and they haven't looked great since the Nebraska game. But for USC, they're still trying to find themselves this year. They don't have a clear identity. I think they want Miller Moss to be the guy, and he's not bad, but he hasn't been particularly reliable this year. We'll have to see what iteration of each of these teams will hit the field this week, but USC is going to be our favorite in this one. Let's move on to the games tomorrow, starting with Washington at 13th ranked Indiana. This one should be very interesting, but not for the best reasons. Indiana's quarterback, Curtis Rourke, has looked elite this year, but he injured his thumb in the game versus Nebraska last week and will miss the week altogether. Taven Jackson will stand in his place, and he looked pretty good against a defeated and uninspired Nebraska defense in the second half of that game, but him and Washington's Will Rogers should make for a great quarterback duel. Would have liked to see Rogers versus Rourke in this one, but that will make this matchup all the more interesting. Next, we have Oklahoma at 18th ranked Ole Miss. This one is fairly simple. Ole Miss is easily the better team here, but Jackson Arnold is back in the starting lineup this week, which is a bit of a swerve in our opinion. This could be his breakout game. He's due for one at some point this year, and if it is, Oklahoma does stand a fighting chance here. We doubt it though. We like the Rebels in this one. Next, we have Georgia Tech at Virginia Tech. Both of these teams with 3 losses, and we still don't know if Haynes King will be back this week. But either way, this should be an outstanding matchup in the ACC. This is a pivotal point for both of these teams. Would love to see King versus Drones. If he's out, we like the Hokies by a lot in this one. If not, we like the Hokies by a little, maybe even Georgia Tech in this one. Next, we have 11th ranked undefeated BYU at UCF. Bit of a spoiler alert here, we will be talking about this matchup later, but UCF is actually favored in this matchup, which is very interesting in our opinion. They had a great performance at Iowa State last week, but we're not sure the home field advantage will play a huge role here. Either way, should be a great matchup. We'll save what we think here for later on in this episode though. Now let's talk about Texas Tech at TCU. This is another one of many great Big 12 matchups this week. That conference is wide open for the taking, and both of these teams have routes to the championship game still. For Tech, they've been steadily improving throughout this year. They did suffer a loss to Baylor last week, who is another interesting team in their own right, and TCU is coming off an ugly win over Utah. Didn't look great in that matchup, but pulled off the win regardless. Both of these teams will need to look better if they want to pull out the win over the other in this one. And next we have Oklahoma State at Baylor. Both of these teams sitting at 3-4 on the outside looking in terms of bowl eligibility. Speaking of Baylor, they face a pretty disappointing Oklahoma State team this week, and the Cowboys are going to have their hands full with a rejuvenated Baylor team led by Sawyer Robertson, who had an amazing day against Texas Tech and whose ground game was also phenomenal in that win. We like Baylor here, but we know the Cowboys have a conference win in them, and it could very well be here. If you get Ollie Gordon, if Alan Bowman doesn't turn the ball over, if the defense plays a little bit better than it has, we'll have to wait and see though. Next, we have West Virginia at Arizona, both with the same records as the last two teams. Two more underperforming Big 12 teams looking to get on track, and this really just feels like a toss-up to us. Arizona is a 3.5-point favorite at home, but the defense and run game hasn't really been there for them this year. For the Mountaineers, the passing game and defense hasn't been there. Garrett Green has been much more effective with his legs, and this game as a whole is going to come down to which team has the weaker weakness. Now let's look at the battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. It's Michigan State going to the Big House to play the Michigan Wolverines. And this one is geared up to be a lot better than it has been the past couple seasons, as both teams are coming in faced with very different circumstances. Michigan has been without a quarterback all season, and Michigan State bounced back last week to beat Iowa. The key to this one will be, as per usual, if the Spartans can limit the Michigan rush offense and generate turnovers. Next, let's talk about 22nd ranked SMU at Duke. Both of these teams are 6-1. Very underrated matchup this week. This has ACC title implications on the line. SMU has looked phenomenal this season. They've been pretty efficient both running and throwing the football, and they've been able to generate turnovers at a pretty high rate. But Duke under Manny Diaz has similarly been fantastic. The offense could definitely use improvement, but the defense has been very solid. It's been the driving factor in most of their wins this year and could very well be in this one. And last in our games to watch, it's Cincinnati at Colorado. This has shootout written all over it. Colorado's defense has been improving, relatively speaking, but neither one of those units have been good this season. Colorado's game plan is going to be the same. Use your NFL quarterbacks and NFL receiver core to win your drives, stack up points, and then play good enough on defense not to blow it. For the Bearcats, though, it'll be more about the rush attack, which Colorado hasn't been great at defending. Corey Kiner and Evan Pryor have been two great options for you in the backfield, and Brendan Sorsby likewise has been very efficient with his arm. Solid offensive matchup here. We think this one could hit the over, which should make this one very, very exciting to watch. And for your group of 5 highlight matchup, it's going to be Tulane at North Texas. This is another very important American Conference matchup. Last week, we looked at North Texas and Memphis, and the Mean Green has a chance to bounce back against yet another team that's vying for a playoff bid in the Tulane Green Wave. And it'll be much of the same formula for North Texas as we said last week. You need Chandler Morris to put up a lot of yards and a ton of points without coughing the ball up, something that John Summerall's Tulane has been more than capable of doing this season. They average over 2 takeaways per game this year and also have a very, very good offense led by Darian Mensah, who has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the conference so far. And with that out of the way, let's get right into our big impact matchups this week, starting with another game tonight. It is the Boise State Broncos ranked 17th taking on the UNLV Rebels. And what a great game this is out of the group of 5. Technically, this should have been our group of 5 highlight matchup, but we couldn't help but add it to our big impact matchups because it truly is a big impact matchup. For Boise State, your key to victory will, of course, be feeding Ashton Jainty, but it will also be limiting the UNLV rushing attack as well. Their offense has almost gotten even better post Matthew Sluka, all that drama. They average a very efficient 250 yards per game on the ground. Virtually all of their rushers average over 5 yards per carry. Great numbers there, and they also generate a ton of turnovers, which will make this one a great watch, great matchup with Heisman and playoff odds all on the line at the same time. We are very excited for this one tonight. Now for the games on Saturday, let's look at the neutral site game between 12th ranked Notre Dame and 24th ranked Navy. How funny is it that Notre Dame plays Navy and Army this year? Very funny in our opinion. But the Fighting Irish are going to be the favorites here in our eyes. Navy has been ridiculously efficient running the football as per usual, but Blake Horvath has also been very efficient passing the ball in the few opportunities he's had this year. But on the other side, Notre Dame has also been very good at running the football and stopping the run. This should still be a very cool game to watch, a very old school matchup that'll make you forget you're watching a college football game in the great year of 2024. Next, let's look at 21st ranked Missouri at 15th ranked Alabama. We are not huge Missouri fans this year. They're 6-1, but the quality of wins just aren't there for us. And they got pummeled by Texas A&M a few weeks ago, which gives a lot of faith in Alabama here, especially at home. Alabama also hasn't played amazing at times this year, but they've very clearly been a better team overall this season. Better quarterback play, better play as a whole on defense, and Missouri's leading rusher Nate Noel will not play this week, which all points to an Alabama win in this one. Now let's look at 20th ranked Illinois at 1st ranked Oregon. This matchup won't look amazing on paper. Oregon looks like the better team completely, and they definitely are, but Illinois isn't going to bow out and accept a loss here. Illinois could absolutely be within 10 points going into the 4th quarter, with that defense forcing a couple turnovers and Luke Altmaier having a typical Luke Altmaier performance, as funny as that may sound. Illinois is not a bad team at all. They've got a lot of fight in them, but Oregon, like we said, still the way better team on paper, probably going to churn out another conference win here. Now let's look at 5th ranked Texas at 25th ranked Vanderbilt. We would be doing ourselves a disservice not to include top 25 Vanderbilt taking on 5th ranked Texas at home in our big impact matchups. What a circumstance we find ourselves in week 9 of this college football season. This matchup is beyond electric. Vanderbilt's going to have the offense to stay in this one. They've been killing it this year with the option apart from last week, but Texas is the better team here, obviously. Coming off a bad week last week and having to go on the road to face an undying Vanderbilt team is just not ideal though. Next, we have 3rd ranked Penn State traveling to Madison to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. Wisconsin has been on a bit of a revenge tour off of 2 bad losses to USC and Alabama earlier in the year. They're coming up back-to-back blowouts in conference play, albeit against pretty inferior conference foes. And they've been another team really hindered by injuries this season, but they've been able to bounce back largely because that rush offense has been a lot better as of late. They've rushed for nearly 200 yards in all of their games the past 3 weeks. But the quarterback situation there is a bit concerning. Braden Locke has not been fantastic in Tyler Van Dyke's absence, unlike Penn State's quarterback Drew Aller, who has looked great this year at times, but they are going to have their hands full, especially because their last game was a road game against USC, which they almost lost. Should be a good game, maybe closer than a lot of people think, but should be exciting either way. And for your O&O Sports Game of the Week, as always, you guys voted on this one. We appreciate the interactions in our community tab for Game of the Week each and every week. This week, it is 8th ranked LSU going to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. These two teams have just looked awesome the past couple weeks, as you'll see the stats popping up on your screen. Texas A&M has especially looked great. They've really just looked good in general since losing to Notre Dame in week 1, and they get the privilege of playing this one in front of the 12th man at Kyle Field. Huge advantage there, but LSU has looked much the same since week 1, a little bit shakier in their games versus South Carolina and Ole Miss, but overall still a great team led by Garrett Nussmeier. Their rushing attack has also been much better as of late, and that defense has stepped up in big moments this year, which when all put together is a formula primed for an excellent game between two excellent teams. We're especially excited to see the quarterback running back duels this week between Nussmeier and Caden Durham, and Connor Wigman of Texas A&M and their running back Le'Veon Moss. But your players to watch in this game will be the quarterback for LSU, Garrett Nussmeier. 7 games so far this year, 183 completions on 283 attempts for 2,222 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 147.4 passer efficiency rating. Could be a little bit more efficient, but if you look at the stats, hasn't been bad at all. And for Texas A&M, it's going to be the defensive lineman, Nick Scorton. In 7 games this year, he's logged 19 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 2 pass defenses, and a forced fumble. A true difference maker for that Texas A&M defensive front. He averages 1.5 tackles for loss and half a sack per game. What more can you really ask for? If he, along with the rest of the defense, can put pressure on Nussmeier, it should make this one all the easier for the Aggies. Next, let's move on to Upset Watch with Todd. Everybody say hi to Todd. Thank you. Ole Miss is going to be our first team. They face Oklahoma at home this week, who is a 20.5 point underdog. I'm just going to give it to you straight. We hope you find someone who believes in you as much as Todd believes in Ole Miss. He has stuck with them hand in hand throughout this season. He hasn't given up in the Rebel faith. Got to be careful how I say that, but Todd thinks they'll win this one big. Maybe even covering here, so he has this one at a 2 out of 10. But like we said earlier, Jackson Arnold is back. I think his arm could be the difference in this one. So I personally have this one a little bit higher than my good friend Todd, but this is Todd's segment, and he's going to have this one in the cold zone this week. Next, we have Indiana at home versus Washington, who is a 6.5 point dog. This one is a lot more tangible. It's at home once again for the Hoosiers, but they are without Rourke, who has been a Heisman caliber player this year. No sarcasm, no BS. He has been phenomenal. But me and Todd both still believe in them. Taven Jackson did look good when he played, like we said, but this one will give them an opportunity to flex that run game, which they are more than capable of. Todd's going to have this one at a 5, but it's still going to be a very manageable game for Indiana. And last, we have BYU at UCF, like we talked about before. We finally circled back to it from earlier, but the Fighting Mormons are actually going to be the underdog in this one, despite being 7-0 and ranked 11th in the country, mainly because they're going to be playing this one in Central Florida. But UCF hasn't looked amazing. They looked better last week against a great Iowa State team, but we don't trust them enough to be able to rattle off multiple great games like that, especially since they're only 2-2 at home. Todd's got this one at a 5.5 out of 10, and we're also not super worried about it, but Vegas usually knows something that we don't, so we'll be monitoring this game thoroughly. And for your last segment of the video, it's our big impact predictions. Here are all of your matchups this week, starting with Boise at UNLV. This one will probably end up being decided by who holds the ball last. Both offenses are very run heavy and effective in their runs, but we actually think the quarterbacks are going to play a very decisive role in this matchup. And ultimately, we trust Malik Williams will be the better quarterback here. So we have UNLV taking this one and handing Boise State their first conference loss, 41-33. Next, let's look at Notre Dame versus Navy in East Rutherford at MetLife Stadium. We should be in for a classic smash mouth capital F football game in this one. Two great teams, two historic teams at that, duking it out in a battle of the rushing offenses, but we like Notre Dame and that defense just a little bit more in this one. Give us the Fighting Irish to win in MetLife Stadium, 28-20. Now let's look at Missouri at Alabama. Like we said earlier, despite not having an amazing past few weeks, we like Alabama more here as a team. Missouri could have a breakout game. Brady Cook could look elite in this one. The defense could finally step up and look like what we thought it would this year. But overall, we're just not confident in that happening at all this year. So give us Alabama to win this one to get back on track at home, 27-17. Next, let's look at Illinois at Oregon. Oregon is phenomenal, and they'll play this one at home, but do not sleep on Illinois this year. Luke Altmaier has been a beast. The running game has been pretty effective at times, and the defense has been solid. With that being said, Oregon is the real deal. They're going to be in the mix to win the Big Ten, so give us the Ducks at home, 30-14. Now let's look at Texas at Vanderbilt. We love the underdog Commodores. They've had a great season, and they've got a lot of Nashville magic going on. Upset Alabama at home earlier in the year, but Texas is still the real deal. They had a bad week last week, but expect them to get it together here. And whether it be with Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning, give us the Longhorns to win this one, 35-20. And now let's look at Penn State at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got it going right now, but they're going to face a brick wall in Penn State. Their defense is leagues ahead of the last three teams they faced. The biggest factor in this one will be if we get a Camp Randall masterclass. We think the fans will show out in this one, and that could disturb Penn State enough for Wisconsin to pull this one out. But we're going to stick with the facts here, which is that Penn State is the better team here. Give us the Nittany Lions to win this one in a close game, 27-21. And in your O&O Sports Game of the Week, LSU at Texas A&M. We like both of these teams a lot if we're being honest, but we've got to have a winner here, and we think whoever wins this one could honestly end up in the SEC title game, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. LSU's offense is great, A&M's defense is rock solid, and what do you do when you can't decide? You go with what you know, and we know that defense wins championships, and we think the Texas A&M defense, along with the 12th man, will be the driving factor in the Aggies winning your capital G Game of the Week, 31-28. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. As always, if you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to tune in on Monday for the Week 9 recap, and we will see you there.